guest that I have for today. He is a political commentator and I'd say a son of North Carolina. We have Mr. Willy Bragg. Willie, good to see you.
Great seeing you too. Yes, great to
Yeah.
be here.
Yep. Nice to have you. Now, you had me on your show earlier in the year, and we had a great conversation, regarding how, my origins, things like that. And I wanted to return the favor. I want to have you back on, especially to talk about your origins as well as your opinions. And also, I want to use you as a positive example for people who really want to speak out. They don't necessarily have to do exactly what you do, but they can do something in regards to communicating with the community. One of the things that I actually wanted to ask you first was, how did you get into this space, and what moved you into the political ideology that you have now? Who in the hell is Willy Bragg, basically?
Okay, I guess we'll begin at the beginning. And we'll start with the Reagan era when I was in my teen years. And I lived in northeastern North Carolina in the rural area. It was very rural, very conservative, and my family didn't quite fit in the area. We just didn't quite fit in. And so, as I said, it was that, and it was a lot of bigotry, a lot of narrow-mindedness, and and even when it affects you personally, it kind of affects your outlook toward society too. And so I kind of started developing, interest in politics as a result. At first, I was just a generic liberal Democrat in the very beginning. Michael Dukakis was my first vote in 1988. I voted for Bill Clinton in 1992, but seeing what Bill Clinton did, continuing the Reagan Bush years, I was like, well, I need to go further left. So I became a socialist, and I joined, I joined the Socialist Party USA, was an activist for about a decade, engaged in independent politics, did a lot of local activism for many years. And let's see, and kind of, voting inside outside. I was willing to support, back then, somebody like an AOC type candidate back then, when many of us were believing in someone like an AOC. By the time Bernie Sanders came along, I became like a huge supporter. And in 2016 and 2020, I was a Bernie Sanders / Tulsi Gabbard supporter. She kind of turned out to be kind of disappointing, and yes, frankly, so did Bernie. And I was thinking about not voting, but I'm like all about supporting Cornel West in 2024. I got into this online space in 2020 because I was trying to work for the Bernie Sanders campaign, trying to spread the word by having a channel to do this as a hobby and on the side. And when he dropped out, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to continue doing this. And it's a way just to vent out and try to build a community. And here I am, and I work for KRTD Media, do a podcast every Saturday night officially for them.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so very much. One of the things that I a lot of us have really gotten in on was that a lot of us have this start off with, it's kind of like a springboard from Bernie Sanders into this space. A lot of us were looking at who was actually talking and who was in the room, basically kind of maneuvering the narrative. And we got in, I personally got into it because it feels like they want to keep us within a certain range. And by they, I mean what I like to call the legacy left. It was great when Bernie was around, but then as we started to go into a particular direction, a lot of us mentally started going even further left than Bernie. I always say that we grew past Bernie, right?
I agree.
And so now you have the same people, and I'm not trying to harp on them, but there's it feels like they're stagnant in that area when it comes to they want another Bernie type figure, when in reality, it's my opinion that a Bernie Sanders is no longer good enough, right? And it's almost the depending on a savior, when in reality, we're both socialists. We know that we save us. We can't depend on a particular person. Is that also part of the reason why you decide to stay in this space? Because from what I see is, I feel like some of the legacy left aren't radical enough.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like they can sometimes be a good gateway, but sometimes they also kind of keep people, in a same space. But at the same time, it's like you can see the value in what they do, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, we need to go further. What are your thoughts? I'm sorry.
Oh, we need to go further. I mean, as far as Bernie Sanders is concerned, he hit a brick wall. I may disagree with those that say he was trying to sheep herd back into the Democratic Party. I think that he hit a brick wall, and he's too scared to be looked upon or written off as the next Ralph Nader. And so this is where he's at. Unfortunately, so as far as the online legacy media, they're in a rut. They're trying to continue. They look at Marianne Williamson. I don't have anything against her except for the Ukraine conflict and her faith in the Democratic Party. But it's just kind of like the Democratic Party can't be reformed. It just can't be reformed. They're not going to give us anything. They're not going to do a damn thing. They gave us a proxy war. They didn't give us a minimum wage increase. They didn't give us a public option. They didn't even go far enough. They didn't do anything to build back better. Nothing. They got nothing. They told, like Jimmy Dore said, the Democrats basically told the left, don't do Medicare for all marches, don't do forced to vote, don't do anything, just stay in your place and just vote harder in each election cycle. That's not good enough. They bust rail strikes and things like that. And it's like, okay, you have two conservative parties. You got the Republicans who are borderline fascists if they're not there already, and you got the Democrats who are just a little bit to the right of a conservative party in other Western countries. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. We need to go further left.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, you just reminded me of a quote that someone said. I'm trying to remember exactly who said it, but shout out to the person that said it. They said, liberalism is just fascism with a smile.
I remember who said it though, but
yeah, somebody said it. It was a great quote, but I'm just like, yeah, we have to move. We have to go into the opposite direction. And I'm not sure if many people in the audience caught my live stream on RBN on Sunday, but one of the things was I went into this analogy of a pregnancy. And right now, our nation really is in a pregnancy. And that pregnancy, you have two results. You have either you have a live birth or stillbirth. There's going to be one of the two ways. And the live birth is socialism. The stillbirth is going to be fascism. There's no in between. There's no baby that's ever born halfway alive and halfway stillborn. And we're going to get to a point where we're going to either be in one direction or the other. And the thing is that I want people to realize that if you're going the fascism route, then you're going Nazi Germany route. If you're going the socialism route, then you're going to go the way of either, China, the former Soviet Union, or you're going to go into Cuba. And the thing is that, with places like, Cuba and China, they relatively, have no homelessness. Relative poverty has been utterly destroyed in China. So, you have all these different benefits that you have in places like this, and even though they're fear mongered left and right, versus do you want marginalized communities, especially, and this includes a lot of white people, because a lot of white people are also disabled. A lot of white people do not fall into this perfect category of, you know, what some of these you know fascists want. So you're also going to be included into it, even if you don't think so right now. So my thing is that we have to push forward an agenda that helps people to think that they do not want to continue to be making money for rich people. You know, so yeah, I mean, I was just saying that to kind of tie into what you were saying earlier, also. But as far as, you know, one of the questions that I also had was regarding the left, because we're venturing into that space right now. As far as the left is concerned, what do you think could be some of these solutions to what the left, especially in the West, is going through? Because it feels like there's some people say it's infighting, some people say it's almost like a calling out of, you know, people who divorce themselves from leftist values, right? What do you see as the issue, and what do you see that is potentially the solution?
Well, and there's a lot of egos, and that's across the political spectrum. I mean, if you're
Mm,
politically charged on the left or the right or the center, people do have. It it takes somebody who's eccentric to get into this field to begin with. But there's always been egos and my way or the highway sort of attitude. And goodness gracious, if I had a dollar for every sectarian fight I've been involved with, I'd be a wealthy man.
well,
You know, because I tell you, there's a lot of people that will, we're like 90% there, but sometimes there's a little detail, and they're like, "What do you mean?" Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, "Well, we're like 90% there, you know." And sometimes some of these differences are very insignificant, and I've been guilty of that too in the past. By the way, I mean, so I mean, this is me. I've been guilty of that, and I've evolved in that regard too. So it takes people kind of overlooking some differences, not too wide of a difference, but it's also going to take, you know, electorally, it's going to take something outside the Democratic Party. Will it be the Greens? Would it be some kind of Labor Party? Like they have in other Western countries, the way they used to be when they were delivering goods. Would it be something like that? Would it be however it's going to evolve? We got to do something that's outside the two conservative parties, and you got to convince organized labor to join the struggle somehow. If you can't get labor behind the struggle, as small as labor is in this country, I don't know what to do. Sometimes I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but
mhm.
I try to find the answers every day.
Yeah, it feels like there needs to be a more of a larger focus on the ground organizing, and I think this is one of the reasons why we're trying to do chapters in RBN, is because even though we're in front of you on the screen, I feel like a lot of people just do not have the guidebook, so to speak, to, okay, so how do we start? And even if many people do not, and even if people do have a guidebook, some can't really just jump because of, a lot of us are weighed down by having to work full-time jobs on top of many of the different things. Some of us have multiple jobs. And so it's really, we're held down by this necessity to produce just to survive. And we don't have the bandwidth, the mental and emotional bandwidth to really consider what things that we need to push forward and to improve our condition. That's what it feels like. And so, in my view, it feels like there's a lot of people who are going, I guess I'll just vote for president because that's all I can really have the energy to do. What is your thoughts about that?
Well, for me, I was, in fact, with this presidential election, I was thinking about never voting again after what we went through with Bernie. And and thinking about not voting at all, like boycotting elections and everything. Sometimes when people resort to voting, it's just a symbolic way of trying to just been out. But I think that there should be other methods. I mean, because honestly, the system, they're not going to allow anything that's remotely tangible for the left to have our victory. So you have to go and find alternative methods, direct actions, things like that. I think that, like, for example, right, the city councilwoman, Shama Sawant's worker strike back is a great model to go by. I mean, it sounds like she's foregoing electoral politics and focusing on organizing and to try to build the labor movement. I think it's building the labor movement and linking with social justice groups, linking people of color, the LGBTQ community, without trying to sound cliche, the whole intersectionality game, try to link together for a common cause. I think that's what it's going to take. And and just trying to find a method that's going to work for everybody.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I think you'll agree, is that, there is a lot of scapegoating that comes from what I like to call the corporate dictators. And so because of that, the scapegoating will come especially towards marginalized communities. And so there's a lot of people who have to kind of throw these things away and open their eyes to realize that we're all connected, and if we realize that, then that's the way to really take down, as we used to say back in the day, the man. And so I feel like, we're getting there and it's starting to grow. But because of that, then the powers that be see it as dangerous and they don't want this to happen. And every single time a union, it's like when every single time a union, starts up, or every single time a new organization pops up and starts serving the communities, like really serving the communities, then that's when their butt puckers just a little bit wider, And so my thing is, I don't just want them to know that we see them and we're doing things to grow, but I want them to meet their end sooner, as soon as possible. And by meeting their end, I mean the system itself. Speaking of meeting their end, I had a billionaire that died last week because, their hubris. So, there's a lot of, talk about that. But, we want a system that is actually going to benefit everybody, not just a few. But I don't know. What do you think is going to be within the next 10 years or so? What do you think the timeline is going to look like?
Well, there is a little bit of optimism overall. And here's where I'm optimistic. Again, I'm going back to the days of Reagan. It was very lonely to even just call yourself a liberal in the late 80s, early 90s, which I'm not a liberal now. But that was a death sentence politically.
Really?
Yeah, you call yourself a liberal, and my God, people are like, and let alone call yourself a socialist back then. But the thing about it is that there are more people on our side on these issues now than back then. I mean, back then, if you said you were for single payer healthcare or socialized medicine, they looked at you like you were nuts. I remember I'm passionately opposed to capital punishment. Always have been from day one. And I remember being made fun of when people found out I opposed the death penalty. Unfortunately, the death penalty still is here, but more people are sympathetic to abolishing capital punishment now than they've been in my lifetime. And I hope that I will live to see capital punishment abolished here in the United States. But more states now have abolished the death penalty in the last 15 years. It was a stall when Reagan became president. With the war on crime and the beefed up law enforcement with the Pentagon, getting stuff from the Pentagon, and the militarization of the police that started really horribly under Reagan and everything, just this, just this whole clampdown on civil liberties that has taken place, and then add the war on terror and the government snooping in your life and my life, just checking up to see how subversive we are or what have you. We kind of live in a neo-McCarthyist era, and they're scared of people like us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this as well. As far as the climate, especially around Reagan, was there the same type of worry where people said, if you don't vote for, like, for instance, they say, if you don't vote for Carter, then this is the most important election of your lifetime. You got to vote for Carter, or else Reagan's going to come in and he's going to destroy the United States, and he's the second coming of Hitler. Was that the same type of? Go ahead.
Yes. Oh, see, when Ronald Reagan, back in the 60s, when Ronald Reagan became governor of California, people thought this was a lunatic, outside of the Jim Crow South. Ronald Reagan of California, he was considered like he was sort of viewed the way they view Ron DeSantis today. And so in 1980, the liberals were like, they weren't like having the nervous breakdown they had when Trump got elected in 2016, but they were a little shaken up, and Reagan happened just as crap happens. I'm editing myself because I don't want to jeopardize your monetization there on your channel. Things happen and life went on. Reagan's 49 state landslide against Mondale in 84. The Democrats felt like they were never going to win another election again. And so the Democrats went further right. They weren't perfect in the 80s, but the Democratic Party were never officially a Labor Party or a Social Democratic Party, never officially, in spite of some good things that FDR did. But they certainly are not one now. And Bill Clinton Reaganized the Democratic Party. And so, but yeah, people have always been scared of what the Republicans coming in there and how it's going to be the second coming of Hitler. They did that with Trump and everything. People kind of have good reason to be scared of DeSantis.
Oh, of course. My thing is that when it comes to people like DeSantis, he's kind of cut from the same cloth as Trump, and Trump is cut from the same cloth as Biden. And people like Trump and Biden, people try to make them seem like they're very different, but really they're two men from the same era with the same values.
No fundamental changes. Remember, he said that.
He said what?
Joe Biden said there will be no fundamental changes back in 2020.
Well, absolutely. He definitely
Yeah.
did see that. And, to add what you said, uh, you look at a lot of the stances that Biden had back then. He didn't mince words, he didn't stutter. And, everything that he says now is really just for political expediency. And he will continuously say that just because he is in the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has shifted. If the Democratic Party had still been the Democratic Party of, let's say, the 1920s and 30s, the Democratic Party before the ideological shift, Joe Biden would fit right on in with the Democratic Party of back then before the ideological shift. So, it just goes to show that, when you look at somebody like Joe Biden, and you have a lot of, a lot of people who are in marginalized groups, and then they try to tout, oh my goodness, at least, Joe Biden's not that great, but at least he's not. They count on that. They count on him at least not being, when in reality he actually is, but they just don't realize it because they're listening to the stenographers of the Democratic Party instead of actually looking at him for what he really is. And, looking at, like, for instance, the proxy war in Ukraine, and the writing a blank check to, Nazis in this country. And then on top of it, the austerity that he is giving an open door to. He's, just like Trump, if not worse. A lot of people are now starting to say he's worse, and it's almost like Trump is the boogeyman, but at the same time, the person that comes behind him that has a smile on his face, that's licking ice cream cones with a pair of aviator glasses on, he's actually the most dangerous one. It's just like people who talk about drag queens, and they'll be like, oh my God, drag queens are the worst. And yet they won't take 2 seconds to look at their pastor, even though he's smiling in their face. So I look at Joe Biden the same way. Like, and I'm not saying that, Donald Trump is likened to a drag queen. Absolutely not. Drag queen. I'd be insulting drag queens like crazy, because drag queens actually do a good service for people and for as far as entertainment. But, Donald Trump is horrible. But the thing is like, I think Joe Biden is that covert horrible, whereas Donald Trump is the overt. You know what I mean?
And Ron DeSantis being the worst of the three.
Yeah.
Because he's smarter and more competent than the other two.
He is, but at the same time, DeSantis doesn't know how to articulate through a more of a populist lens. He's very corporate. And Donald Trump may not be as bad socially, but Ron DeSantis may not be. Ron DeSantis is typical average Republican when it comes to economic issues, if that makes any sense.
What Ron DeSantis is, and I summed it up this way, he's basically everything I hated about George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, who I considered the worst president we ever had. He's the worst, George W. Bush. I hated the Bush-Cheney period, the administration more than any in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. He's basically everything I hated about Bush and Cheney, and everything that all the real and the kind of a projection that people have of Donald Trump without the comedy show.
Okay, I can concede to that.
Or maybe he's Dr. Evil, Dr. Evil from Austin.
I just got a visual of Ron DeSantis' ball going like this.
No, I'm thinking that Donald Trump is Dr. Evil. Now, Ron DeSantis is Mike Myers from Halloween.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
He's not charismatic, but he knows the institutions of government, and he can get. He's not charismatic, but he can get normal people to be fooled. I mean, I don't. I mean, Bill Maher thinks that things are going to be okay if Ron DeSantis is president. I'm like, what the hell?
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
Bill Maher thinks everything's going to be okay when he's okay with Biden and he'll be okay with DeSantis. Bill Maher.
But wait, he has an issue with Trump.
Well, he did sue him over a joke. Trump did try to sue him over a joke.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but Bill Maher gets his whitey tighties in a bunch because Donald Trump got his whitey tighties in a bunch, but yet you're going to give credence to people like Joe Biden and Ron DeSantis?
Yep, that's my. I mean, he's horrible. He's went downhill.
Look, that gel then went straight to his brain.
Yeah, I used to kind of respect him.
How smooth brain can he be?
He's horrible today.
Look, I don't know what is gone into Bill Maher. What is he putting in his weed? Because there's not weed that he's putting in there. It's got to be something else that he's lacing it with. Because for him to think that, oh, Joe Biden's okay, Ron DeSantis okay, but Trump bad, I'm like, okay. That's like saying, okay, I'm cool with getting dunked into a vat of acid, but drowning and burning alive, I'm okay with, but getting dumped into a vat of acid, I'm just not okay with. Like, what?
He's even buddy with Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin these days, Bill Maher. He's gone downhill. And he sides with the corporate Democrats. I mean, like the worst of the corporate, like Amy Klobuchar was his choice in 2020 for president.
Look, Bill, I can't talk about Bill Maher without giving a bit of a chuckle because I just feel like he's kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the whole, like, I think Amy Klobuchar would be a great candidate. Makes me feel like Amy Klobuchar was in the background with the stapler in her hand, threatening him if he doesn't say her name. You know, that's what it feels like. He's like, I think Amy Klobuchar would be good. How about that? And she's like, all right.
And she is so obnoxious. I mean, she was obnoxious. Wow. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I get the guilt trip because I've always voted third party for president. I just do that because neither the Democrats or Republicans has anything to offer me on the major issues I care about. They don't offer me anything, and so I vote third party as much as I can. And I until very recently, like maybe in the last couple of years, I may vote for the occasional Democrat. And then run to the nearest toilet. But I'm not even doing that game anymore. That lesser evil. I mean, they got to be the two-party system has got to be eliminated. It's eliminated. I
agree.
Came to that realization.
So, what is your thoughts specifically on the presidential race climate that we have right now regarding people like Dr. Cornel West, RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson? Because we all know that, it's just Joe Biden is just a walking, talking clusterfuck. So what do you think about people that are currently in the Democratic primary as well as Dr. Cornel West?
Well, they're going to do the Bernie Sanders on RFK and Marianne Williamson. In spite of what we all may think of those two, they're getting rigged, in my opinion. I mean, let me rephrase that. I don't want to get anybody any troubles with my words here. I know how they are with the algorithms. That was my opinion, not the official position of the program. I'm going to say Bernie Sanders. That's the way I'm going to put it. They're going to Bernie Sanders those two, RFK and Marianne Williamson. I kind of think that they're going to do the same thing to Trump in some ways. Like Fox News, they got it. They're in the tank for DeSantis. So you're going to see a lot of creative things going on in the primaries. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Cornell West.
Oh, Cornell West, 100% for him. I don't think it's a big deal with like the people making it about, oh, he went from the People's Party to the Green Party. I was going to support him no matter which party he was going with, Green Party or the People's Party. He's got the policies, he's got the ideas, he's got the receipts. I mean, he's basically the perfect candidate. And yeah, I'm sure there's probably an issue or two that I may disagree with him. No two people are going to agree. I mean, I was the biggest Bernie bro at one time, and sure, there was an occasional issue here and there that I would have found myself in a disagreement with. So, but here's the thing: Cornell West, I think, is the logical choice. The only drawback with Cornell West is that if the Republicans win in 2024, and this is where he's got guts and Bernie Sanders don't. He is going to be faulted for a Republican victory in 2024. They're going to hate on him, and they're going to hate on the left. They're going to just like they did in 2016 and like they did in 2000. We're used to the hate when the Democrats don't get their way. Where whether the left is inside the Democratic Party or they're outside of the Democratic Party, they get the hate from the Democratic machine, and then they usually go rightward afterwards.
Yeah, I honestly do think that he should be prepared for that.
I think he knows.
You think so?
I think he's aware.
Yeah.
And he's got guts. He's doing the right thing, and as I said, he's got guts, and so did Ralph Nader, but Bernie Sanders, not so much,
No, I think there's a lot of fear there, but that's what the duopoly does, is that they fear monger even to their members. And so I think with people like Dr. West running, I mean, he could, hopefully he brushes things like that off his shoulder, but the thing is like, even though he may be aware of the blame that will be ensuing if a Republican wins, kind of like not if, but when, I honestly think a Republican is going to win. Anyways, if or when it happens, I honestly do think that somebody like Dr. West, he makes sure that it does not get to him. Because if it does get to him, then because they'll do it before the general election. They'll try to make it seem like, oh, if you drop out, then they can absorb your voters and then into the Democratic Party, when in reality, most of the voters who are voting Green aren't actually going to go with the duopoly. They're just going to sit it out.
Yeah, because they're Green Party members. They're registered Greens. They're dues-paying members of the Green Party in many of these states that has a Green Party presence. Yeah. I mean, I'm a registered Green in North Carolina. I'm a registered Green in North Carolina.
Yeah. And the thing is that, a lot of us, who are independents and in third parties, we say no, to neither. It's either going to be, it's kind of like either a green, independent or third party or bust. Because ultimately, it's, I don't see the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as two separate parties. I see them as a uniparty. That's why I call them the Demo Republican Party, because they both are one and the same.